Today, Chinese state media broke a story, jot this down, claiming the virus may not have originated in China after all. This is fascinating. Instead, they suspect it all started at a lab in Maryland, Fort Detrick. And they want to send in a team from the World Health Organization, you know, the one that can't get to Wuhan and investigate where it really started. They want to send them to Maryland. Let's ask the governor. Better yet, let's ask the senator from Arkansas, Tom Cotton. Senator, this is a hot story. You going to follow it?
Brian, let's just say that I'm not going to investigate Fort Detrick as the origins of the coronavirus. You know, it was a year ago tomorrow, Brian, that I made my first official act about the coronavirus. I wrote to the administration and asked them to stop travel from China. A year ago tomorrow that I had my first media appearance in which I discussed how grave this threat could be while the rest of Washington was obsessed with impeachment. That media appearance was on the Brian Kilmeade show on January 22nd last year. I didn't have any special information. You know, I'm not a scientist or a medical doctor. I could simply tell from the way China was lying and covering up about the origins of this virus on the one hand and the drastic, far-reaching lockdowns they were imposing that it was going to be much more dangerous than they were saying, and sadly that proved right. China still has not come clean about the origins of this virus, which I still believe most likely resulted from a lab accident in Wuhan.
Well, a couple of things. Today was the day the WHO greeted America back. As Anthony Fauci said, I'm ready to pay you again. And great job, everyone, on the pandemic. They still haven't found out how it started. They are still answering to China on everything. Who sent him in there in such a demeaning way? Why didn't he come in there with guns blazing and say, I'm back, but things are going to change?
Well, that's because they're in hock to China as an institution. In some cases, their leaders are in hock to China. The WHO has consistently aided and abetted China in covering up the origins of this virus. China continues to lie. It continues to try to intimidate. Brian, just yesterday, as Joe Biden was sworn in, a few minutes later, China announced sanctions against several high-ranking former Trump officials. That was not geared so much against those officials, but a shot across the bow of Joe Biden's national security team, that if you take a tough line on China, we will take a tough line on you. We will try to hurt your livelihood in the future. That has to be met with a response by the Biden administration and from the Congress. We cannot allow China to continue this campaign of lies and disinformation and intimidation.
You know, so in fact, we have it. Here's an excerpt from the editorial that you're referring to in the Washington Post, actually, and let's take a look. Here it is. We don't have it. Okay, here we go. I got some time. That's why I brought a watch. Here we go. The true intent of the sanctions is to target incoming officials is an audacious attempt to intimidate them against continuing any of the Trump policies. Now, we know that Mike Pompeo is not going to vacation in Wuhan. We also know that Donald Trump or anybody like John Bolton, they said it's a badge of honor. But you're trying to say this is a brushback pitch to this administration. But so far, Anthony Blinken, the incoming Secretary of State, we assume, he's been pretty strong, saying that essentially the Trump administration had it right to be tough. Is that encouraging?
So that's encouraging, but they need to specifically condemn the actions that the Chinese Communist Party took against these outgoing officials. Again, this is a shot across the bow of the Biden officials. This is not just some laughing matter. They're going to say, well, we can't take our wives on a second honeymoon to Wuhan. No, the Chinese Communist Party said they would target any institution or company with which these officials are affiliated. Think about that. Once you leave government, you go back to work at a private company or a law firm or a professor at a university or maybe a think tank. If they have any interest in China, which a vast number of American companies and universities and institutions do, that would threaten their livelihood, and those institutions may not bring them back. They may not say so publicly, but it just goes to show the risk of the economic entanglement we've allowed to rise up in between our two nations over the 30 years, and why we need to decouple that economic entanglement so China doesn't have this kind of leverage over us.
It's unbelievable, too, and we'll talk about this another time, but the EU going ahead and making another trade deal with China at a time in which they literally poisoned the world and destroyed their economy. That shows they have no backbone. We have to step in there right now and say, you're not acting like allies. But I'm going to bring you to something else. I want to know what these next 4 years are going to be like. You are now in the minority. It's 50-50, but you're technically in the minority in the Senate. And if the past is prologue, we could look to how Barack Obama handled his years when things went wrong. He quickly blamed Bush. Remember, watch.
I want to say a few words about the deepening economic crisis that we've inherited and the need for urgent action. And my administration inherited a deficit of over $1 trillion. We've inherited an economic crisis as deep and as dire as any since the Great Depression.
This happened for 6 years, and we saw it again today with Joe Biden. Said there's no plan to get rid of the put the vaccine in people's arms. They left it with there was no plan at all, already exaggerating, saying that his plan of 1 million shots a day is something he's going to aspire to. They say we're basically already doing that. So can you see this happening again? Blame Trump instead of blame Bush?
Well, I'm pretty sure that Joe Biden will probably try to do that, but let's remember, Donald Trump and no American was responsible for this pandemic or the recession it unleashed. It was the culpability of the Chinese Communist Party. And to say there's no plan at all, I mean, look, there's a reason why there are multiple vaccines now either approved or soon to be approved. That's because of Operation Warp Speed, that the Trump administration got a viable vaccine to market and distributed in less than a year, something that often takes a decade. And you're right, just last week we were averaging more than 900,000 shots a day. So we're already on the glide path to getting to 1 million shots a day. This is Joe Biden and his administration trying to deflect blame and trying to lower expectations. They were not given a beer cupboard. They were given a miracle of a vaccine in record time and distribution that is increasingly improving every day.
Senator, you've had a long day. Appreciate you ending it with us. Have a great day, and see you soon.
Thanks, Brian.
All right. Meanwhile, so much of what the senator has said has come true, and he initially gets criticized.